Hey everyone, let's work on this Finra task. So this is a very popular interview question. It's important that you understand how to do it, how to explain what you did step by step. So let's work on it. We're going to have some number, and then we're going to write a function that will print that number. Okay, so that's going to be our, let's say, default functionality. But we have a couple conditions. When the number is a multiple of 3, we want to print fin instead of the number, right? So we're always printing the number, but in the case where the number is divisible by 3, it's a multiple of 3, then we're going to print fin instead of the number. Then when the number is a multiple of 5, we're going to print ra instead of the number. And when the number is a multiple of both 3 and 5, then we're going to print full fin ra instead of the number. Okay, so we have 4 possible outcomes here. Let's get started. We'll declare our number here. Let's just call it num. And we can start this number to be anything, and we'll edit and test as we go. But based on that number, we need to know a couple things, right? Now, the first thought process you might have is, okay, let me go and start writing a bunch of if statements. But if we think about the structure, we should understand. So let's just break it down here. We know that there's 4 outcomes. Okay, so let's maybe write it like this. There's four possible outcomes. You can have either just the number. All right, so you can have just the number. You can have when it's divisible by 3 evenly, when it's divisible by 5 evenly, and both. All right, so these are kind of all the possible outcomes that we can have when it's just a number, when it's divisible by 3 evenly, when it's divisible by 5, and when it's divisible by both. And so we're going to need some conditions here. The divisibility by 3 and divisibility by 5 and both, those are all kind of related to each other. So that's one thing I want to avoid. I don't want to repeat myself if I can help it. So for this one, if you went and started putting a bunch of if statements and put the booleans together, that's fine. But I want to reuse my booleans because I know that I'm going to need to use them a couple times. So I'm going to make a boolean here. I'm going to call it by 3. And I'm just going to check, is the number divisible by 3 evenly? So I'll say number. And the way that we check divisibility is with the remainder operator. So I'm going to check, is it divisible by 3? When I say divisibility, I mean, can I take 3 and, or can I take my number and then divide it by 3? If I can do that evenly, which means that there's no left over, then it's divisible evenly. For example, 3 remainder 3 is 0. So this number would be, or this boolean would be true in that case. If I change the number to something like 6, 6 is still evenly divisible by 3 because there would be no left over. And so that's exactly what I want to do here. I also want to check for the divisibility by 5. Similar approach. I'm just going to check by 5 instead. Okay. So now that I have both of those, again, the reason that I made them as variables first is because I'm going to reuse them. I'm going to actually use them in the if statements a couple times. So I'm going to check immediately if my number is divisible by 3 and is divisible by 5. So basically the condition of both. For this boolean, could you also have written divisibility by 15? Yes, that should work out mathematically as well. But because I'm going to need to reuse these booleans anyway, I wrote them one time and then I'm going to call them now in my if statement. So if the number is divisible by 3 and 5, I will print the full fin ra. Okay. Else if the number is only divisible by 3, then I believe I only wanted to print fin. Else if the number was divisible by 5 only, then I wanted to print ra. And I can probably just put an else here at the end, which is going to just print my original number here instead of anything else. So a couple of things to note. The order of my if statements here is important. I chose to do the condition where it's divisible by 5 and 3 immediately in the beginning. The reason I did that is because if I change the order in another way, like if I checked 3 first or 5 first, In the cases where it was divisible by both, then this condition would never have been ran. So I never would have seen Finra. So that's why I chose to do this one first, because I need to make sure to check that condition first. The other thing here, could I have replaced these print statements in a different way? Yes, I could have made maybe a reusable variable, maybe like a result variable, and then assigned to that one instead of printing multiple times. That's just another change that I can make. But this is should be good, so let's check. When a number was 6, that's divisible by 3, so I see Fin. Perfect. Let's check for the case of something like 10. Right, so if I rerun it with 10, we see that we have raw because it was divisible by 5. Okay, let's check another number that's not divisible by either. Let's go with 7. So 7 is not divisible by 3 or 5. Those booleans would be false. And then we get just the number from the else. That's exactly what we wanted. And then let's do one that's divisible by both. I guess let's do 30. And when we show the number 30, we can see that we're getting the full result Finra because the first if statement is true now. The other note I want to make, reinforcing why I made variables in the first place. As you can see, I'm using this by 3 and by 3 here 2 times. If I were to do this without the Boolean variables, I would have needed to written like this statement here and here. So I would need to do the calculation multiple times. That's why I did it once and then reused that from the variable. So that's it for this one. Make sure that you go through this one and really practice this one since, as I said, this is a very popular question in terms of coding questions. See you in the next one.